Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Cornerbird stream. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. I want to do something different today because, like, why not? It's a special day today. So I was thinking, I was live streaming doing this. The past 3 live streams this year. And you know, like, it'll be fun to do something, like take a break from things and try to mix things up over this year. I think there's something that I want to work on too, that I guess, like, to work on different works or different projects, or have multiple projects going on concurrently. So that's what we will do. And I'm like totally not prepared for this live stream, so I just take it and just wing it. So I sculpted flowers before for this one. As you can see, this is kind of like my first attempt at doing flower sculpts. By the way, I'm also listening to this if you want to have a go at something new. This really, I think it's live music. This is so good. Yeah, I really like this tree here. So yeah, I was thinking, oh, it would be quite cool to have a go at sculpting roses today, because I haven't sculpted roses before, but I think it might be quite similar to this, and maybe it might be interesting to anyone tuning in on how I do like organic sculpting from scratch. So this, I feel like this is a pretty good exercise to do a demonstration of some sort. It's not a tutorial by any means. It's just a free and easy demo. So let's switch this off. Let's start from the beginning. How do I focus on this? Can I just double tap this? So probably if you start a new scene, where is it? If you start a new scene, it will look something like this. Oh, and before I start on this, let me drop a message in the chat. Okay. So this, typically what you start with is something like this. And normally people, of what I've seen others do, you'd be working with subdivisions like that. Today's live stream, as usual, there's no script, so I apologize in advance if I kind of like just jump around too much. So usually it's like this, which might work in our favor right now. So if I can I reverse this? Yeah, so I'll do a reverse to get a low topology. And then let's get some reference for a rose, because I keep forgetting how a rose looks like. Just looking at roses, and this will be You know, something like this. I'm not really sure whether it is fake, but I guess this idea is pretty good for what I like. I guess pretty hard to tell what is real and fake anymore. I think in terms of the shape, maybe something. I feel like I have trust issues now with images, but well, something like this is good. I'll just look at a whole bunch of different ones and like pick and choose. Usually what I will do is to pick and choose specific things that I like from each of them, like what stands out to me. So that's what I'll do. But I think what I want to focus today is, because I kind of wanted to make tutorials in the future, but for one thing I'm scared of making videos because I haven't done it before. But well, tutorial videos. But the other thing is also I don't really know how to structure it yet. Hopefully after today I don't know, who knows. Maybe after today I will figure things out. And normally I don't really use this. What I normally use is dynamic topology. But with high resolution, it is pretty hard to... It will be quite hard for especially people new to 3D to manipulate. So for the sake of making things simple, I will use lower resolution to build the base. And again, this is not a tutorial, so but I'll try my best to explain the things that I know or that works for me. So I also have a bunch of hotkeys right here. I wonder whether maybe I should bring this up so that it's more visible, because I will use this a lot. Although I guess this is visible here too. The thunder is going on. So first thing that I would do usually would be to flatten with Gizmo. So I try to do overall shapes manipulation with the Gizmo tool, because it's more straightforward and in some sense easier to understand like what's going on, because you can just adjust like that. Of course, like this is not the only way they can do it, but it's kind of typically what I like to do. And the thinner something is, the harder it will be to... So let's say if I want to draw something like this. So when I'm sculpting like this, it's because symmetry is on. Give me a moment. Haven't used multi-res in so long. Oh no, it's not because of multi-res. Where's the symmetry? Give me the plane. Show me the plane. Okay, symmetry is there. Sorry. Let me just backtrack. So something helpful with Nomad Sculpt, what I normally use to is seeing where the symmetry is with this symmetry tab. It's probably really confusing to anyone new, I guess. So I want to, the symmetry doesn't really matter, I guess, but I want to shape the petals like this. So based on where the symmetry is, I will squeeze it this way. And maybe now it's going to work. Yeah, so when something is too thin like this, it can affect the back faces. So you see, I'm drawing here, but it's affecting the back face, the back side. So normally how I deal with this, because I'm not really that proficient with Nomad Sculpt or like with sculpting, maybe in the future I will figure out how to go about with this. But normally one way to go about doing it is to just not make this too thin, because the thicker the geometry, the better the software will be able to tell where the back face is and not touch it. So you can see now the back face is unaffected. But the other way would be to bring up, I hope that, okay, it's not blocked. So bring up under this specific tab when you're in, I think it's just, yeah, when you're in any of these brush tools settings and click on this, there's this filter tab right here, and okay, I want it to be on crease. Under the filter tab, there's a front facing vertex only. So if I do that, and I do a crease tool like that, by default crease tool is inwards, but because I like to draw with the crease tool, by default I set it to invert so that it comes out like that, and you can see that it doesn't affect the back. I can show you if I don't have this enabled, it starts affecting the back side. So this is one of the helpful ways when I decided, I finalized the design for a thin piece of geometry. This is what I'll do to add like really fine details without affecting the back. But one of the limitations of this, when it comes to the edges, which is kind of working really well every single time. I guess this is considered not working really well compared to doing like that, or maybe with the brush. So with front facing vertex only on, you can see like there's some weird shit happening on the edges, because it's kind of just trying to ignore the vertices on the back, and it causes some weirdness happening here. Whereas if it's disabled, it would work perfectly fine on a really thin edge where the front and the back meets. So because I'm not really that, I wouldn't say that I am not used to it, but I don't find that I'm the best at sculpting yet. So I kind of need a handicap of some sort. And to have the handicap, I just make this a little bit thicker, just to give myself a bit of a buffer. And yeah, I don't want this to be off yet. Is that too much explaining? too much to explain. I guess rose. Okay, so I think roses are quite wide. I guess thinner in the inside. You know, this might be harder than I thought. Why did I decide to do every single time I decide to do something I feel like I regret right afterwards. Okay, what am I doing? So now moving on to something that is really cool, which I use a lot, not just for flowers, which is a repeaters. And for this case example, I want to use radial. Where's the grid? Okay. I hope this is... And so with the radial repeaters, so add this right here while this sphere is being selected. Can I see where the repeater is? Where's the... Oh, I see. It's a little bit complicated because I have this existing scene right here, but let me just... Why can't I? I'm just going to restart, I guess. So add a sphere. No, I don't. So I've added a sphere. Oh, you can double tap this to focus on the object. Add the sphere. Squeeze it. Make sure that validate this. Where is the symmetry? You can probably tell by now that this is really not a tutorial. So I gotten this. I'm going to add a radial. So you can see that the radial is here. Wonder whether I can disable. So the radial is right in the middle of this object, which is fine for now, but it's not the most optimal, but I'll go through that later on. So with the radial on, the object will be repeated in a circle like this. And because it's a flower petal, 1, 2, 3. Trying to count the number of petals. Maybe 4 is fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or maybe 5. The number of repeats can be adjusted with this. And I think I want 5. What's this? Oh, cool. I feel like there's something new that I've not tried before. So something like this. Kind of looks like shit right now, but it will get better. And so because the flowers are so hard to screenshot. Because flowers are like this from the side view. I want the repeater to be at the base like this, so that the pivot point is at the bottom of the petals. So I can either move this up, which is the easiest thing to do. Actually, does this matter? I feel like I did something like this in my previous projects, but you know what, actually it doesn't really matter. But it looks neater to me for it to be lower down. So that's what I'll do. I think there's also something about, yeah, so if I want to create a group to organize this later, it will match up with the radial. So this positioning of the petals is just more like a housekeeping kind of habit for me. You're able to sit here. Yeah, it's just a habit for me. Then I want to rotate this. It's always easier to manipulate the overall shape first before going into the details. So once this is done, you can see like the overall shape of this. Then go to, no, I don't. I think that's too low. Now I will manipulate this with the drag tool. There's a move tool and the drag tool. And move tool feels a bit more diffused, so it might be easier for people starting out to control. But after using drag tool for a really long time, I feel like I just use it more often. And if you have the Apple Pencil Pro, you can turn the twisting of the pencil matters. It might be a little bit of a learning curve to have this twist together with movement. So I think there was a way to disable it? I keep forgetting where the thing is. Yes, so under this tab here, under gestures, you can disable the roll if you feel like it's too much to handle or like too much for your brain to process. Especially when you're starting out, sometimes just the thing of moving in that axis is already like too overwhelming. I've been sculpting quite a bit, so I kind of can imagine, like picture the space in 3D. So having the twist and the movement is kind of like gotten used to it already. The good thing about the twisting motion is that, like previously with, let me just switch this off. Previously, when it comes to the edges like that, it's a bit tough to like make this curve properly. So you can see like I am trying to push the petals to wrap around, but because I can only move things about, the edges of the petals are kind of like coming out a bit. But with the rolling, I can just simply twist it to tuck it in. I think. Digging my own grave right now. So that's what I will do. I'll start doing dynamic topology later on. So stretch faces like this, where you can see the polygons are being too stretched out. doesn't really bother me, like doesn't really matter to me. I think for flowers, you want this to be quite in. There's an overlap here. There's also something else some stuff that I've adjusted to suit my workflow. So camera manipulation cannot be done with my pen because I think there's many times when I'll be trying to sculpt the edges of something, but because I click here, then it starts moving the camera. So these were just adjustments made over time when I feel frustrated that something is not working out for me. The same thing with a sculpt. I think the palm rejection or like finger rejection, I don't really know how to prevent stray streaks from my fingers. Oh, you see. And I like to navigate around with my hands. You see it just happened again. It's a bit too much for me. So this is off. Gizmo too. Fingers don't touch gizmo. Material too. Not sure whether but object selection is done with my fingers, because if I have the stylus on, can I? Yes, I can select this, but it gets in the way for me when I start doing something like this, where maybe something like this makes more sense, where I'll be trying to sculpt something here, but when I get to the fringe, the intersections, I tend to accidentally select. Is it on right now? Yeah, I tend to select the objects, and that became annoying over time. So object selection is just with my hands. So I sculpt, and then select. The other thing that I disabled, because I kept triggering this. Where is it? These are off because I kept triggering these. Undo history with double finger taps also undid that. Disabled that because I have a macropad. There's been too many times when I just want to move around and I will undo something. I think there's been once when I accidentally undid, but because I didn't notice it, I lost quite a bit of work that way. I think there's something, because this is kind of a tutorial, right? Tutorials need indicators. Would this be more helpful? Or is this only helpful for screen mirroring setting? I'll just keep it on for now. So those are the things that I have that may differ for others. Let me switch this off and go back to this. Actually, this thing is really annoying. Okay. I think because I want to flesh out the overall shape like this, I'll work on the outside. And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to determine the overall size of it, and everything else will follow. If I start from the center, I feel like, because there are more details as it gets closer and closer to the center, like here, I might end up spending too much time trying to make this part perfect if I start from the center and going out. So to save time, I'll start on the bigger picture first. Anyone tuning into the stream, welcome to the corner of the stream. Today's Valentine's Day special. I'm going to make a really, hopefully a pretty rose. Okay, so I want the petals to have a nice curve. So I'm looking at different angles and just slowly pushing. Just making sure that I don't have intersections like this. None of this. And it's a good idea to just take the time to get it close to what you want right here. And don't forget that there's a gizmo tool that you can use to quite easily and quite simply move the objects. There's also a solo is this a button? Which I have set to my macropad. This is good for choosing songs. So this is good for, like, it's a little bit hard to look at what's going on here, right? This will be good for doing more specific adjustments. And just doing things slowly in case there's someone out there who wants to sculpt a flower for someone and might be a little bit, I feel like probably might be a bit hard, right? So I'll just take my time. I think sometimes the edges of flowers will have a lip like this, or you can see over here an outward lip. So I'm not really that concerned if like something like this happens, but let's just make it clean right now. So sometimes I'm just selecting different ones because like, oh, it's easier to adjust this right now. Oh, it's easier to adjust this right now, so I will select this and move it. I think that's pretty good, but I feel like from roses I've seen in person should be higher, so I will move this. It's quite important to get a feel of moving things around with large brushes, tool size I mean, or small radius. So with smaller radius it's easier to do minute adjustments like that, but with the big ones it's easier to manipulate large shapes like this. Kind of looks like more like a buttercup right now. So what I'm seeing is that the inner leaves don't really come out as much, which I think is, do I have this enabled? Oh yes, I have. Okay, so on the edges of the flowers it has an outward turn, whereas the inside, sorry for the shit drawing, they are quite straight. Hope this is. So I think usually when I do my sculpts, and there's a bunch of elements, but I want to repeat the geometry, I want to clone the geometry, I would try to do an in-between. So I think this kind, something like this, maybe is like too much for now for me. Is it too tall right now? It's always good to be mindful of the different sides. So it might look really nice on this angle, but because this is 3D, you have to be mindful of every angle and be mindful of intersections. So if I move this too much, you can see that there's an intersection right here. We don't want that. Of course, I say that stretch pixels are fine, but the more it's stretched out, the harder it is to manipulate. And when you start getting this orange stuff, which is the back face coming in, I'm not sure whether can I go in? Yeah, so you see the inner face, the orange. It's very easy to get into this mess when vertices are too stretched out. So as much as I feel like this doesn't really bother me, I would still want to use bigger brush size to do more gentle manipulation. Like this is still fine, but just be mindful that it's just gonna be a pain in the ass to like move up that kind of stuff, and I should just move on. So you can see like I'm pretty stuck with my idea of what a rose is, because I'm like, oh, when I move it up high, I feel like I'm not feeling it. So when that happens, I just move on. Don't be too stuck with something, even if it's not working out, because I think especially with sculpting, it's not like drawing where I would have to place I guess if like with the equivalent of drawing would be to do, those chicken scratches, or like do those rough lines in pencil, and then going in with ink later. So that's technically what I'm doing with sculpting, where I'm just like blocking in shapes. But the nice thing about sculpting compared to drawing is that the shape is already there, and if I find that later on it's not right, then I can just push things around to make them right. So I guess right now the scene is pretty simple. It's just a group, radial, and a spear, which has turned into a petal. The next step would be to either have... So I can do a clone and push this in and rotate it too. Oh, but before I do that, just to keep things neat, I will adjust the pivot point for this, because when I rotate the petal, it makes more sense to, especially when I want to do finer adjustments later on, it makes more sense to have the pivot point at the bottom of the petal over here. And the way that I do that, I'm not really sure if... Did I bind this? Not sure this. I'm not really sure if I did a specific binding to adjust pivot. Probably not. Oh, it's probably okay. It's probably this one. So if you have a key bind for add sub, something else that is, I think, I'm not really sure, something else that's helpful would be to use that same hotkey to manipulate the position of the pivot point. I'm not sure whether can I undo that? Yeah, I'm not sure. So for people new to 3D, working in 3D, it's going to be pretty overwhelming to imagine like a 3D, like picture a 3D space in your head. Because I'm more used to it, it's easier for me. But even if I'm used to it, I'll still do this simple exercise where I'll just try to find like the side profile, like one profile of the object. So this object right now is quite diagonal, right? If I do it based on this, then it'll be hard to manipulate this way. And why are you? Can I undo that? Yeah. Okay, so you can undo the pivot points adjustments. So based on this, like what is intuitive to me right now would be to move this down. So I can, wait, oops. So I can, with this activated, I can move it down. And then now I will rotate to, usually I'll rotate like 90 degrees roughly and see like, oh, okay, now it's at a good place. Back view, bottom view, top view. Oh. And this is not really set in stone because, like, let's say if I decide that it's here, then I'll move this pivot point here later on. So just keep an open mind when it comes to things like this. Something else would be to, let me see. Something else to keep in mind is that this, with this activated, anything that you press would set the pivot point. And this can be frustrating for anyone who hasn't had like a handle of 3D space. But just know that there's all these buttons right here to kind of like reset things. Like align will align the axis to the, I don't even know what this is called. What is this called? Whatever that is. It'll align to the grid like that. But yeah, I don't really bother with this unless I make a mess like that. Then I'm just like, just click wherever I feel would work. Okay, enough of that. Let's do it properly this time. Let's rotate around, make sure that it's at the point where I want at every single angle. Yes. It doesn't really have to be exact too. Just whatever feels more intuitive to you. Like, who knows, maybe you find it more intuitive there. Just do whatever. And now that the position is right, I'll start doing rotations. Probably not going to go through like basic 3D what's that called? Basic 3D interface. Yes, interface. Same thing. I try to find the angle where it's I'm just looking at the time. I need to see how much time do I have. Okay, not too bad, I think. Where I feel like it's easier to determine what the angle of the pivot point should be. So like this paddle right here, I kind of want to put the pivot point in the direction of the paddle. And the reason why I'm doing this is, let's say if I want to extend the paddle, I can simply just extend it up, and now it's long. So there's something helpful for setting the orientation, like the rotation of the gizmo to suit what you need. Like let's say if I have this slanted like that, and I'm like, oh, I want it to be stretched out horizontally, and I stretch this out, but you can see it's stretching out in like a skewed angle, and I wouldn't want that. So looking at the bottom or top view, I will align this like that so that I can do that. I feel like at this point I would switch off symmetry, because you can see like the symmetry is kind of like messed up right now, because actually, why is it messed up? Alright, it shouldn't be. Things like this always happen, I guess, where I will mess this up for no reason. How did this happen? But if that's the reason why you want to use symmetry still, there is a way to fix this where the symmetry is not working. You can see the symmetry is here right now. This is the middle line. So if I draw here, technically it should be affecting this point, but it's not. And I think this is probably, it will probably be a very common problem for people starting out, to suddenly be like what the hell happened here? And when that happens, it's quite simple to fix it. The same thing where I've been adjusting the gizmo. There is under the symmetry tab here, you can adjust the orientation of this mirror. So I click this gizmo edit, and now I can adjust like that. I may be thinking like, oh, does it have to be super exact? No, it doesn't, because you can just force the symmetry with either this. I think this one means that it will mirror the right side to the left, and then this mirrors the left to the right. So I think I guess I want the bigger side. Let me see. Yeah, so it will force the symmetry. I think when this first came out with the new update, I was quite confused what this is. Honestly, I don't really know what this is yet. But just clicking this and like that, and sometimes it's just good to do it and see what you like, undo it if you don't like it. So let's see if I want to do this. Then now you see that you have the symmetry back, and the symmetry is fixed, like so. But I don't need the symmetry, so I'll just switch it off. Hopefully, if you have trouble with symmetry getting messed up at some point, don't need to worry about it. It's pretty simple to fix it. That's how I usually fix my symmetry when I do something. Yeah, like especially when working with so many elements, at some point the group is going to grow. It's really hard to keep up with every single thing. Okay. This is now back to, let me drink some. Okay, now back to where we left off. Would be creating the next layer. It's pretty easy to, yes, it seems like the size of the petal on the outside are larger, and it gets smaller and smaller as we go in. So based on that understanding, we are going to wait. Let me get my bearings. Let me delete this. Let's restart. Okay, so I have this gizmo adjusted. Nice, like it looks neater now. Let's say I want to do a fallen petal. Now you see it's easy to just manipulate the mesh this way. So it's always good to have the general shape and the gizmo positioning and rotation set up before doing anything else. At least that's what I like to do at the start. The next thing would be creating the layers, right? I can clone this. And then squeeze it so that they don't overlap like that. I feel like the mesh is a bit distracting. Okay, that's better. Actually, wait, no. I guess it's easier now. Let's just choose. Oh, it's not too bright. I guess this one's easier to, yeah, it's easier to see. And this is it overlaps too much. So what I would do would be to move it slightly so that it's overlapping like this, where the tip of this aligns with the intersection of the outer petals. So this is something that is useful. It's starting to look a bit more like a rose, I hope. But I'm not going to do this because I think, wait, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Do I want to do this? I guess it's fine. Yeah, I think something like this looks good. But something else that I would do instead of this would be to create different radials for the different layers, just because it's easier to manipulate. And I will show you what I mean when I clone this. So if I clone this whole thing, I'll have duplicate. But instead of manipulating these, I'm going to manipulate the radial instead. So same thing, just shrink them down. See, like the layers are already building up right now really fast, and the inner layers will start going in. So that's just something that I'm mindful of. See, so having the pivot point down here just makes it a lot easier to adjust and make it thinner. Make it thinner like that. I think it's a bit slanted right now, but it really doesn't really matter to me. Sometimes the reasoning, the logic behind how this is rotated can also be determined by what is easier for you to manipulate. So something like this will be a bit confusing to adjust. Maybe something simpler would be to have it like this, so that when you're adjusting the positions, it's more understandable, I guess. Something like that. So just yeah, something to keep in mind. It really doesn't have to be. You don't have to follow the tutorial. Like, just do what makes sense to you. Honestly, I don't really know how many pieces there are, but I think as long as it looks like a rose, I'm happy with whatever this is. And it's just easier to keep things more, like, let's say this radial has 5. It's kind of like easier to be more systematic about it when I set the radial to 5 for everything. I think this one, something that I'm keeping in mind is the spaces in between the petals. I don't want there to be a really huge gap between them. I think it's nice to keep it compact. Something like this. You can see sometimes it's helpful to switch things off to focus on the inside. So this is too much. I need to rotate. And then for the inside, I'm probably not going to do such a dense architecture there. I kind of like what's going on here. So I'll clone this. And then like this is a uniform scale. Then this is scaling on one single axis. Sometimes when I want to scale based on Sometimes if I want to scale it in 2 axes instead of doing like that, I would just scale it uniformly and then adjust that single axis that I want. Not really sure whether that makes sense, but it's something that I do so that I don't get this. Now you can see the shape is not so circular anymore. Just little tips here and there to make life easier. I think this has to be I guess the petals have to be pretty. No, actually this is fine. I know, like, I think for roses it probably is like this. Screen easier. Maybe black. Like a radial whirlpool. But for the sake of it just being simple, I'll just keep the overlap to the different layers, like just to keep things simple. I mean, it's not like it's it's not super obvious that it's not like a real rose, I guess. So same thing. Give me a moment. I'm gonna have a toilet break. Let's just keep this here. Hey, sorry that took so long. I'm not really sure why, but my headphones just started disconnecting. I want to listen to my music, so I had to get that fixed. Think probably now it's a good time to have a quick recap of what's been done. So I have this piece, single piece, adjusted the, what's this thing called? The gizmo puts it the pivot point so that I can manipulate this more easily. And it has a radial, so the radial is in the middle and it's going around this point. Radial can be adjusted. You can do as many as you want, as few as you want. But I want it to be 5. The other thing is also, I feel like when people ask me about how I make my choices, it's always about, oh, why did you do that? Oh, why do you do this workflow? Oh, what's your reasoning behind doing that to your sculpt? And like for me, the answer is pretty simple, where I base it off on what I don't want it to do, I guess. I kind of thought that I've already structured the sentence in my head, but when it came out of my mouth. So it's quite simple to keep duplicating the petals, the spears, and shrink them and bring them in. But with my experience of working with radials and all that, I feel like sometimes I'll get into situations where I'll be like, oh, I want this layer to be specifically like rotated just a little bit off, and having the radial split up is helpful. So it might look a bit overwhelming maybe if you're not used to it, but once you get used to it, it's very helpful to have things more separated. And the other thing is also, because I'm trying to keep this rows simple, where the overlaps are only happening on each layer. So it's not a spiral overlap, it's just overlapping in each ring, if I can call it that. And because of that, usually with flowers, it looks, I mean, it's kind of the structure of the flower too, but it looks prettier if the tips of the petals intersects with the intersection of the outer petals, like this. So you can see that this looks quite nice, like compared to something like that. Aesthetically, this looks better to me. And with that in mind, something that is simple to do would be, the next ring would most likely be here and will most likely be a repeat of this. So that's just what I did. I cloned this and then move it in, and then do individual adjustments like that. Just keep things really simple and straightforward, so that no matter how many pieces you have, that, how to say this, when the scene becomes complicated, there's still like this logical structure going on in your head of how things are organized. And that's usually how I will work. Like, let's see. Like, I'll probably just add this in. So this was one of the previous projects I did. And yeah, when it becomes like too many, like how many pieces are this? I'm not really sure. When there's a lot going on, it just I need to start doing systematic and logical structures in the outliner to keep up with what's going on in the scene. So that's, you can see, like, compared to that, this scene is pretty simple, but it's always a good practice, like no matter how simple the scene is, to have a logical structure, something that makes sense to you, because something that makes sense to me may not work for someone else. Like maybe something that makes sense for someone else would be to have, let me see, this one inside, would be to have different radials for different layers so that I can manipulate individual layers like that. And I think I would just keep this because I prefer things that way. So like I want to have individual radials for this, so I'll clone this and then I'll just keep the outer one. So I'm keeping this outer one in this radial and deleting the outer one in this one. So now I can manipulate each of them that way, or like this, or even like moving pieces. Maybe I'll just do that for this. It's not really a must, but who knows, like what I'll need later on. So this is, yeah, like as you build up the outliner, like let's say if you're just tuning into the live stream right now, this might look a bit too much, but these will just slowly build up over time. Okay, let's just get back to this. The inside is going to curve more, but I will try to do the best that I can. Just going to, let me look at the reference. You have the reference, they kind of close up quite a bit. Maybe I'll want to put this like that and then do as much as I can. The keyword is always like do as much overall manipulation as you can. And now I can start curving this. No, I can start curving this more. Okay, so this needs to really curve. It's just a bit, I feel like I'm not doing it right. Okay, I'll just undo that. Maybe I'm not approaching this right. Okay, so maybe I'll rotate out. I'll rotate out this way, outward, and then curve more inward. I think that looks more like what it should look like. remove the intersections. I think that looks, right now it's a bit too bulbous. I want it to taper a bit. That's what I'll be doing. Just kind of like rotating bit by bit and move things bit by bit. It's always checking the different angles. Check the different angles. I think that looks pretty nice. And this is just kind of like the base structure. I'm not really not really doing the details yet to make it asymmetrical or organic, because there are a lot of petals in a rose. I always find it helpful with the Gizmo tool to look at what things look like if I move the different axes like that. So it's trial and error, I guess. I think that looks quite pretty. I think that looks pretty nice. Now you can see the beauty of keeping things all separated. Now that I've done like the base shape, I probably shifted the petals a bit too much, but it's easier to adjust it like this, just to rotate the radial instead of the individual objects, like trying to rotate this. So instead of doing that, I'll just rotate this with the same concept of I want it to be like I feel like none of the colors are really standing out. Maybe like this. Or maybe this. This kind of shape. So I rotate this. Oh, wherever that looks nice. Like if this looks nice, just go for it. So rotate. This is a little bit. Okay, the tip is here, so put like that. It kind of looks like a rose, and the inside are shorter. It seems like the second or third last layers are taller. That's what I will do. It's always it's really easy to get impatient with wanting to go into details, but like time and time again, I will always thank myself, like, oh, thanks for setting the base setting the base up nicely at the beginning before doing the details. Yeah, so I think that's pretty nice. I was hoping that this live stream is not going to fail. I'm glad that it's not failing. I wasn't really sure when I started live stream. So something that I like to do now, because I have the latest iPad and I have RAM now, would be to add colors. And I think I've been really liking painting my sculpts. And I like to kind of like go back and forth between sculpting and painting. And I think now that I'm painting a lot, I find that I find that this paint and smudge to the pencil squeeze. So that's what I'm doing. I think something else that would be useful would be to understand the instance. So with instancing, let me just create another layer. You know what? I'm just going to instance this. Probably should explain what I'm doing right now. Okay, so I can instance this, and with instancing what I do. Wait, why is it not? Oh, right. So with instancing, so these two objects are instances of each other. What I adjust on this mesh would be reflected on this mesh. The same thing with colors, with painting. I don't really like this color. With painting too, it will be reflected on the instance object. Or something else that's like pretty neat would be, oh, it doesn't really matter. Is that when I instance like this, I can have the radial instance. That means if I set the radial to 6 for this, it will also set it to 6 for this. But if I only just want the sphere to be instance, I can disable the instancing on the radial by just selecting this and uninstance. So right now adjusting this would affect this, but adjusting the radial wouldn't affect the other radial. Is that something worth explaining? Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, so all these petals can be instance, but I don't really want to do that, but it can be done. Let me see if I need to undo anything. Okay. It's also quite good to just check if you have any duplicated mesh. So like from time to time again, I will keep this, I'll do like a cleanup to look at if I have any like hidden duplicated mesh inside. I think besides that, and of course the handy thing about having group is just to keep things clean. I can also name this rose. And of course with the 13-inch iPad Pro, it's pretty nice to like having this real estate so that I can just keep the outliner open as I set this up. Alright, so now it's time to do something fun before we do anything else. It doesn't really have to... What's that? The order can be different, I guess. But now that I like to do painting, I like to paint as I sculpt. So that's what I'm doing right now. So with the paintbrush, it's not going to affect... With this paintbrush, it wouldn't affect the geometry. It's not going to sculpt, it will just add color to the vertices. So that's what. Also, this button right here will keep the window open as I click around. See, now it's starting to look more like a rose. I kind of like to do gradients when it comes to coloring. And that's why it's that's why I'm doing a darker shade for now, and I'll paint in. Does this look nice? Guess it's not too bad. Of course, all these is not final. Something very useful that I learned from Craig Newland's course would be to paint gradients. Let's say if I'm painting this, if this is the object that I'm painting, let's say this is the object, instead of painting the gradient like this, it's always good to have a diagonal. With the gradient transition. Now there's just a simple tip that I keep in mind when I'm doing my coloring, even for 3D stuff. I'm just using a brighter color to make things pop at the edge. I think something like this is pretty good. So now that this is done, like this can, I guess this can kind of, like, let's say if let's do the bottom first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want to add the leaves now at the bottom. So I'll just clone this just to, instead of like adding a new radial, I want the radial to be at the same space. And a sure way to get that done is to just clone an existing radial. And maybe I'll just adjust this. So let me shrink this and bring it out like that. Rotate this outward. that and then stretch out. This is why it's really useful to set the gizmo at a logical point. You can see how just how easy it is when the pivot point makes sense. Yeah, it's really easy to just adjust the size to that. There's something else. And when I can't do... Actually, wait. Has this always been 6? Maybe this should be... Should I keep this as 5 or 6? I guess 5 is better. For the bottom, maybe 5 is good too. And I can also rename this as leaf. And at the edge of the limit of the gizmo tool, I'll just try to do as much as I can, and when I hit a dead end, that's when I start moving things around again. Because this object is really small, I can use a lower resolution, so that's easier to manipulate this. The magic's going to happen when I start doing dynamic topology. So something like this is still fine. It's still alright too. Like, it's not going to mess anything up. To squeeze the edge, I tend to go in further and try to use a small brush to push things in. I think it's something like this. Because right now everything is done with a radial, so I can't help it that every single piece will be the same. But that's because we are doing a kind of like setting up the base shape right now. So yeah, it's gonna look weird because everything looks so symmetrical, like so identical. And because we can easily spot symmetrical or repeating patterns or shapes, that's why it looks really weird right now. But once we start going into detailing and keeping things, start adding variations to each of them, then that's when it's going to look really good. But for now, let's do a pale, a bit desaturated, a bit more yellow. Looks a bit cheesy right now. I think I just do this for now. Okay, so that's done. Oh, because I haven't really messed up the geometry yet, I haven't really gone through something else that I always use. So next thing that I always use would be the smooth tool. Oh, where's my hair so poofy today? The smooth tool right here. So typically when I'm not using dynamic topology yet, I'll use smooth tool to kind of like even out the vertices, like the spaces between them. I'm going to smooth it right now. It's attached to command key for me. So yeah, it's an easy way to just neaten up the mesh. You can see before and after. So it's a neat way to just fix like really compressed edges and whatnot. I think this one's intersecting. I push that in. I think I'm pretty happy with how it's looking right now. Like the spaces between the different layers are not too bad. Maybe it would be nicer if there's less space, but I'm happy with the number of petals right now. So that's good. Something else that's fun to use would be the tube tool. So when it comes to managing the outliner, when there's kind of like a rule of, I mean, not really a rule, but something that I tend to do would be to select, when I want to create new stuff, I'll select the start of the hierarchy. Is that what you say? Because let's say if I select this and I create something new, let's get the tube tool out. Why not drawing? So if I get the tube tool out, you can see that it's in this area right here, and I can easily just drag it out like that. But normally I just tend to select where I want it to be so that I don't need to readjust. Tube tool, maybe I'll just grab this color. I can just paint all right now. I guess painting is a tutorial on its own. I'm not really going to. Sometimes B-spline creates a smoother transition. Like for this case, I think I'll prefer to use B-spline. Clicking on it will either create a sharp corner, so that's what the black dot is. So let's just create a nice shape from all angles. I think something like this. I've also key map turntable, so it's useful for something like this, just to look around. This is not final, so don't get too attached to it. To create the, I guess, wait, no, roses are quite, its stems are quite cylindrical, but let's try it. I've used the tube tool quite a bit, so I'm just basing this off like past experience. To create something that maybe I'll like. I don't recall what did I. Maybe I'll do this. Was this too much? If I tap this twice, it will create 2 anchor points for the twisting. And with this, I can adjust one of them. Remember to save your work. Yeah, I think something like this. I guess I'm not going for realism. I just want to get something looking nice and aesthetic. Something like this would be nice. Yep. Okay. Just to give it some visual interest from far, because I think rose stems are quite smooth and cylindrical, but it's a good way to just show what the tube tool is capable of. Okay, now that this is done, I can start doing individual petals. But before that, I want to start shaping out the overhangs. And that's what I'll do. Something like that looks good. If the paint is too distracting, there's a way to hide the paint. I think the paint is working pretty well, so I'll keep it. Why am I seeing this? Looking at different angles. Can smooth this out. It's looking a bit too poofy. So I'm just adjusting the shape. One area at a time. The good thing about flower petals is that small lumpy areas are fine. Like it looks more organic that way. But that's why I can just go in and push things in and out without much thought, I guess. Yeah, looking quite pretty. So now that the base is done, you can just end it here. Give it to someone that you want to wish Valentine's Day for. Although I guess it's too late. Probably should have done this yesterday. Yeah, like this can be good. Can even do a stem leaf. Because I'll put this here so that the stem and the leaf are grouped together. I can also clone this. So if I select this, and then clone this and move it around, rotate it, like no one's going to know that it's the same thing. And you can even just like adjust this, and suddenly it's a different piece. Or even I think even just like rotate some of the radials. As long as the minor changes, it will look pretty good. Can make a bouquet out of this. We're going to take it further right now by adding some, like, now that I think about it, like now that I think about it, I can just keep the multi-res because it's not super, like I can just move this out, but then it's not really the way that I sculpt. So I can keep the multi-res and just like subdivide and add more detail to it like that. But I'll just do what I normally do, which is to use dynamic topology. I also have that in my hotkey right here. So I'm going to enable dynamic topology for everything. Just what I'm used to. So now with dynamic topology, something that I like to do for dynamic, okay, something that's easy for me to understand when it comes to dynamic topology is how should I phrase this? How do I do a tutorial on dynamic topology? Because I don't really understand it myself. Details. Yeah, I guess you can just click on this question mark and look at this. So for dynamic topology, intuitively I feel more comfortable with setting it to zoom, just because it's easier for me to keep in mind what okay, so like let's say if I do constant, and it's easier to see it with wireframe. If you prefer to work with multi-res resolution, then I think this is something different. But if you're interested to know how I sculpt my works this will be the start of how I do it. So with constant, the idea for constant is that no matter where I am in space, whether I'm super zoomed out or if I'm up close like this, the number of vertices, the resolution for the mesh doesn't change. Whereas, and I can adjust this to be as low resolution or as high as I want it to be. So we can try. And I think the good thing is that Nomad Sculpt will kind of give you an indicator of what is too much, or at least what is too much for the amount of RAM you have on your iPad. So you can see the numbers starting to get red. You probably don't want to work with this because it might either like overload the app, it might crash, or it might just be super laggy, and there's really no reason to go up that high. So just try things out. For radius, the size of your brush determines the resolution. So I think if I do like this versus, so the size of the brush determines the resolution, which might be useful if, what is it useful for? It's useful if, let's say, you're just doing smoothing out with a big brush, and then you want to go into the creases to find the details with a small brush. With this method, it can be an easy way to keep things consistent because the zoom doesn't really matter too. And then if I want to go really detailed. But the problem with this is that I don't really have a consistent, I'm not consistent with my brush size. Sometimes I want the mesh to have a high resolution even when I'm working with a super large brush. So you can see where that becomes a problem, for me at least. But with sculpting, it's always about trying, or like making art, I guess. It's all about trying out different things and see what works for you. Because something that makes doing the work fun is always the most important. Like, even if it's not efficient, as long as you find it fun for yourself, you're more likely to keep using it. And in my case, like using this, I end up doing way more sculpts than trying to copy someone else's workflow. So this is something that I always use, which is screen. And with screen, the resolution gets bigger or smaller. I mean higher or lower based on where I am, and also depending on the amount of details. By default it's set to 100. But let's say if I feel this is too little resolution, I feel like it's not too bad. But I feel like if this too, I can see the jagged edges right there, then I'll increase it and see what that gives me, whether or not I like it or not. Then I can squeeze this out. So you can see now I can add some some stuff. So with flower petals, I want to create these things. I'm not really sure whether I have time to do it, like to finish it in time for the stream, but I want to try create all these little details. And the way to do that would be to use a small brush. Why is that dummy? And start going in. See, like right off the bat, that gives so much. Does it give so much life? It can give so much. What does it give? It makes it look more lifelike to me. But now the other problem would be that I don't want it to all look the same. Let me see. Let me drink some water. So I don't want all of this to look the same. And if I look at it from the top, I can spot these identical divots on the petals. So I need to start thinking about, do I want this to start sculpting individual details right now? Or do I want to do more general shaping and details before I split them all up and do all these tiny things? So I want to fix all these polygonal shapes. So I'm not going to separate them yet. I'll still work on this. When it comes to dynamic topology, I think it's just about experimenting, have some practice. Right now I'm kind of doing it without that much thought. The thoughts that I have is just, oh, it's too low res. Let me just fix this up a bit. Like, oh, it's too low res, so wait, what's the straight line? Yeah, it's too low res, and I'll just increase this. Or if it's sometimes when it's like too high res, then it becomes very lumpy, right? I'd be like, oh my god, this is so hard to work with, and then I'll just go down and smooth that out. Something like that. There's nothing much to it. So isolate, smooth out, then look at it. It's like looking not bad. This one, so it's not bad. I think this should connect. I think something helpful too would be, let's say if the mesh is really messed up and like super thin, you might encounter problems like this where smoothing out will cause it to decrease. One way to fix that would be to increase the resolution so that it doesn't disappear like that when you're smoothing it out. Or I will just remove this away and then now it's clean with a trim tool. So that's just stuff that I do intuitively. I think I can. Oh, now you see this too low. I don't want to lose so much details. I think when it comes to roses, there is like a nice, it's nice to have this point. And I think all the petals can have it. So this is something that I would do for all of them. Doesn't really matter if it's looking too identical right now. Just working on what makes sense. I mean, what I want each, I guess I'm working on what I want each petal to have. Like what characteristics would they share and what characteristics would be individual. Okay, let's keep going. I think it's a bit too sharp. And I think the petals here can be wider. So like sometimes instead of doing gizmo tool, I will just use the drag brush and move things around. Like that. I guess it doesn't really matter what this looks like too, as long as everything looks good. As long as it's not too so keeping in mind not to overlap things. I think that looks pretty nice. In any problematic areas, just fix it right now. I feel like the outer petal should be larger. So I'll do that. Always rotate around to make sure that there isn't like a awkward straight line or awkward shape. Honestly, I don't really know what the side view is supposed to look like. Huh. Maybe something is... But I think once I add the details, it should be good. Is this supposed to be this round? Oh, maybe it's supposed to be more in. Like that be good? I I guess I don't want this to be too sharp either. Oh, okay. It's almost time for dinner time. So let me... It's a little bit hard to talk about sculpting at the same time, I guess. But I hope that this tutorial is not... this fake tutorial is not incredibly slow or anything. And I hope that it will be helpful for anyone. So I can also go in and start using the crease tool. Start going in. I want to start going into the details. But I wouldn't do this much right now because I don't want all of them to be the same, and this is going to be really fast. But when it comes to the inner ones, I think I can get away with... I'm just alternating between invert and non-inverted. So as I draw the lines, I'm alternating and smoothing out the edges of these areas. I want this to go in, maybe this goes out and then in. Oh wait, and also keep in mind, right now it's fine because this is the like a hidden petal, but because I don't have, as explained earlier, I don't have this front facing vertex only, so I just need to be mindful that when I'm smoothing this or drawing, it will affect the other side. And if you don't want that to happen, then activate this so that drawing on this wouldn't, drawing one side wouldn't affect the other side. But I kind of like how it's doing two sides at once. So I just keep it, and then I can turn these things around. It doesn't have to be perfect on anything. I think I'm still getting a bit tired from trying to do this fake tutorial. This is probably the limit. I probably already hit the limit. So maybe I might start talking nonsense right now. So yeah, it's really up to you when you want to add individual details. Probably something like this is not super obvious that they are all the same. I'm going to go in here and do the same thing, alternating, smoothing. And if, I guess because I was pressing really lightly, I'm not affecting the other side. So sometimes the strength of the brush matters. on whether or not the back face will be affected. Because these are hidden, I'm not going to mind that much, like what they look like. But I think based on the rafts, I don't want it to be so maybe I can't have gone too far for this. Like now it looks like cloth. So I will go down in resolution and smooth things out a bit more. Yeah, it doesn't really matter, I guess. Smooth this out. There's a straight line, so just twisting things around, because this meant to be organic. I don't want any straight lines. So I think maybe that's like all I will do for the general. Let me right now, just making sure that there are no intersections. So general shaping is done. And before I go, I'll start doing, maybe I'll just save this. I'll start doing, okay, turn on the aircon very well. I'll start doing individual adjustments now, because I think I've done enough. I don't see any intersections, and I don't see anything too weird. You need this. I think it's looking good. So now it's a good time to add individual details. So right now, whatever I do on each of them would be reflected on the other pieces, because this object is mirrored right now in the radial pattern. So if I want to start adding specific details to each of them, I'll need to I'll need to validate this. So I just click on this and validate, and now you have 3 different options. There's a keep instances, uninstance, and join children. So with this one, because I want each of them to have its own piece. Yeah. When I click validate, I can choose to keep instance, and what this does is to create individual objects, but it will be the same thing where all these objects are instances of each other. So I don't want that. if I choose this option, now this is one geometry. So I don't want that either. What I want would be to have all of them separated without instancing. Like this. So now I can go into individual pieces. Actually, before that, I need to make sure that the resolution is not so low. And because this is the outermost petal, and there's quite a big surface area where I can see what's going on, I'll need to pay more attention to the type of details that I do for this one. And I think I don't really want to... let me think. No, I think it's fine. So I can use a crease like this to sharpen the edges. Because actually I should have done it. So you can see, like, I'm just constantly undoing, redoing, because I'll make realizations too late that there's something that I have to do before, and that's pretty normal. Oh, I see. So I want to use a crease tool to draw along the edges. I think something like that looks pretty good. Isolate the piece so that I can work on the overlap areas. But these will be hidden, so it's not that important to get them right. So it just looks cleaner this way. It looks thinner and sharper. And I can do the same for the other areas. Because I have to go soon, I'm not going to. I think that will be good enough. So I can do the same thing, validate, uninstance, and I'll start doing super specific detailing. Maybe sometimes just like these small and I guess because flower petals are soft, you don't want the unless you're going for a really stylized look, I'm not going to make the creases look that defined. Probably something like this. Something like this is more stylized. can use the drag tool to, I think I need to go higher. Use the drag tool to rotate. Something like that. I'm pressing really lightly because I don't really want to mess up the other side too much. Oh wait, I've really messed it up. I guess it doesn't really matter. Again, if it's hard to control, this is some option, but maybe because I'm not thinking straight anymore, I just want to get this done. Trying to do this as fast as I can. And then with that done, now I can start shaping based on the reference. Maybe I want this one to open up more like this. Just going bit by bit. Just creating details. Shifting things around, squeezing things. And sometimes the messier it is, to a certain extent, the more details you can easily put in without that much effort. Can even use the brush tool and like just draw down like that to create the shapes. Something like that. Oops. Okay. You can see the comparison between this one and this one. Just a little bit really makes a difference. It's one of my favorite process of sculpting, adding the little bits of stuff. I feel like it really makes things come to life. So sometimes roses have this kind of bumps. so I can make these bumps. I feel like I'm failing. Okay, I don't really know how to make these bumps. This bump, and then smoothing it out to add resolution, because I increased this. I think something like that is nice. Can even adjust this shape. Something like that. I think this is one of the fun parts too. Like just messing things up. It's like you put in the hard work to set the base, and now you can destroy it in an aesthetic way. Maybe this one I'll have more of a lip, something like this, because the idea of it is to make sure that each petal has a distinct look. But I think I also need it to look a bit softer. And I think sometimes they need to have this kind of edges. Or like even scratches. It will, like just having that one scratch there instantly gives a lot of detail without that much work. Something like that. I feel like right now it's too round, and I think to make it look more sophisticated, I just need to adjust the shape from the top view. It makes me think that maybe I should have done 6 petals for the outside. Okay, this one can go out a bit more, like that. And it'd be nice for it to have these kind of wrinkles. It still looks a bit too Sometimes when I feel it is too wompy, I'll bring down the resolution and blur it out. Because the lower the resolution, the smoother the surfaces will be too. So that's a hack that I do sometimes. I think this petal is too... maybe something like this. I feel like I'm not really sure what is making this not look like... I feel like there's a quality of it that makes it not rose-like, but I can't see it. Like, I'm not really sure what is making this look a bit different from a rose. So I can do the same for the others, or like, I guess sometimes it doesn't really matter if there is a similar trait to the petals. So I think I just put in as much as I can right now. And then this one's too lumpy. Don't really like the lumpiness. I guess because I have to go off soon, I'll just stop it here. But you get the idea of validate this, uninstance this, and now I can start doing individual pieces. And that there is a way to... it's possible to go overboard with this. So just be careful, like, not to add too much. If it's too straight, same thing. Turn it. Then last thing is this thing. What does it look like? I'm just going to do this really quickly. Make sure that it's not, like, make sure that it's not really, the shape that's not weird. Let's draw this. Sometimes smoothing out the edges will create a sharp line. So that's an easy way to do that. Validate this, move this. Because these leaves are quite small. So when they're identical, is a lot more obvious. That's why it's really important to start start working on these, like create differences to them. That makes sense. Something like that. Then the last bit is this one. I just create this simple shape so that I can dynamic topology this and smooth it out randomly. So that I can create this nice spiral look. I mean, it's just what I wanted for the look. But then maybe I don't really like it, so but yeah, I don't really need to think about it right now. So this is sticking out too much. I think for a first time sculpting a rose, this is a pretty good, it's like a pretty good first try, I guess. Yeah, it's pretty good. I think just quickly add, let's do this for, be mindful of spaces between details. You don't want it to be too like even. It will look inorganic that way. Something like that. Or even like a double crease. Not too bad. Then for the final bit, you can turn on post-processing. Just for fun. Oh, and before that, before I go, which I've been saying for a while now, let's just create a few pieces. Something like that. And then can open some pieces. And sometimes with the idea of the top flower usually blooming slower than the ones at the bottom. So maybe I want this to be like a younger piece, which would mean Because I know that the gizmo, the pivot point is at the bottom, I don't really need to worry about the petals moving like too far, because I know that I'm rotating based on the correct pivot point. That's why setting the pivot point is really important. Something like this. If it looks ugly, just adjust it until it makes sense. Yeah, couple of roses. And because the outline is really neat, it's like manageable. It's not out of hand. I think that's about it. I feel like the post-processing is not good for. Let me turn this off. Oops. This it's too shiny. Was something that's pretty cool. It's possible to paint just the roughness and not the color. So I can adjust the roughness this way. I should have done this at the beginning. So I can just paint in the roughness for the areas which I feel is too shiny. Just some stuff to think about. Or I can just paint in all the roughness. Something like that. Okay, thanks for tuning in. I'll head off now. Happy that the rose actually worked out. I was kind of scared that I would fail with this because I didn't prep for this, but yeah, cool. Until next one, I'll go back to working on this. I'm not really sure whether I want to put the roses with her, but I'll probably use the rose for some other pieces, because for now I think just having 4 different plants for this one is enough for me. Yeah, so I just keep this in like the back burner and bring it out when I feel like it. Happy Valentine's Day, and thanks for tuning in.